In the year 356 before Christ, a prince named Alexander was born in the royal city of Pella, beginning a story that would change history. His mother, Olympias, believed her son was destined for greatness and raised him with courage and ambition. As a young boy, Alexander watched his father, King Philip II, train the powerful Macedonian army. Philip began teaching Alexander the skills of a warrior, preparing him to become a future king. As Alexander grew older, the great philosopher Aristotle became his teacher. Aristotle taught him about science, philosophy, geography, and the many kingdoms beyond Macedonia. One day, a powerful black horse named Bucephalus refused to let anyone ride him. Alexander calmly approached the frightened horse and realized it feared its own shadow. Turning Bucephalus toward the sun, Alexander mounted him successfully, astonishing everyone who watched. King Philip proudly embraced his son, realizing he possessed remarkable courage and wisdom. Standing on a hill overlooking Macedonia, Alexander dreamed of exploring lands far beyond the horizon. The young prince had no idea that one day he would build one of the greatest empires the world had ever known. King Philip II shared his vision of a powerful Macedonian kingdom with his son, Alexander. Soon after, the kingdom gathered for a grand royal celebration filled with nobles, soldiers, and honored guests. But the celebration suddenly turned into tragedy when King Philip II was assassinated before the crowd. At just 20 years old, Alexander was declared the new king of Macedon. Many neighboring kingdoms believed the young king was weak and began to rebel against his rule. Alexander quickly gathered his army and inspired his soldiers to stand with him. Leading from the front, he defeated every rebellion and proved he was a fearless commander. After restoring peace, Alexander entered the conquered cities as their new ruler. With the kingdom secure once again, he met with his generals to plan an even greater campaign. Alexander knew that his father's dream was not yet complete, and he set his eyes on the mighty Persian Empire. Standing on a hill, he looked toward the east, determined to conquer lands no Macedonian had ever ruled. His greatest journey was about to begin. Alexander led his army across the Hellespont, leaving Europe behind and entering Asia. At the Granicus River, his soldiers won their first major victory against the Persian forces. Soon, Alexander faced the mighty Persian king, Darius III, in a battle that would shape history. Leading a fearless cavalry charge, Alexander broke through the Persian lines and drove his enemy into retreat. Darius III fled the battlefield, leaving much of his empire in Alexander's hands. Alexander entered the magnificent city of Babylon, where many people welcomed him as their new ruler. His campaign then brought him to the land of Egypt, where his army crossed the desert toward the Nile. The people of Egypt greeted Alexander as a liberator and welcomed him with great honor. Along the Mediterranean coast, Alexander ordered the construction of a new city that would forever bear his name, Alexandria. Egyptian priests honored Alexander as pharaoh, recognizing him as the ruler of their land. Standing above the Nile, Alexander admired the civilization of Egypt and prepared for the next stage of his journey. With new lands under his rule, Alexander turned his eyes toward the distant east, where even greater challenges awaited. Alexander marched east with his army, determined to reach the distant lands of India. At the Battle of the Hydaspes, he faced the brave King Porus and his powerful war elephants. Although Alexander won the battle, his soldiers were exhausted after years of endless fighting. His weary army refused to march any farther, forcing Alexander to end his eastward conquest. With a heavy heart, he led his men on the long journey back toward Babylon. When Alexander returned to Babylon, he began planning new expeditions across the world. Before those plans could begin, he suddenly became seriously ill. At only 32 years old, Alexander the Great died in Babylon, leaving his empire without a clear successor. After his death, his generals divided the vast empire among themselves. Even though his empire was split, his achievements continued to inspire generations. Alexander's name became one of the greatest in history, remembered for his courage, leadership, and extraordinary victories. More than 2,000 years later, the story of Alexander the Great continues to inspire people around the world.